Now this is where it gets fun because we can bring back our beautiful, sweet little counter. We do that using a state notifier provider, which is the final piece of our state management requirements, which is manipulating the data. Now, displaying the data is going to be very similar to what we did with the other providers. But the key difference here is it's another different type of provider. So let's go ahead and create it. Because we have the riverpod snippets, we have the state notifier provider ready for us there. We're going to call this the counter provider. And our state notifier provider gives us access to two things: the counter notifier and the actual count, which is going to be an integer. And the thing we're going to be returning here is our counter notifier. So you see there's a problem. We haven't defined this counter notifier anywhere. That's because we need to define it here, and we're going to call it counter notifier, which is a state notifier. Let me finish filling this out, and then we'll cover what exactly is going on here. So our state notifier is the one that's actually doing the work. This is where the state will be held and where all the actions upon it will be done. The state notifier provider provides both our counter notifier, which will have all our functions, and the actual state, the current state, which is an integer since it's a count. So you can think of the state notifier as the little worker actually doing all the stuff, and the state notifier provider is like the boss giving people access to everything that you're doing. So first, we put in the super a 0. That's the initial value of our counter. But we can add some functions to it, like the add function. Now, a state notifier is immutable, which means that nothing can change the state of this. The state doesn't change. That means every time you are updating the state, you actually need to completely reset the state to a new value. So to do this, we can't just do state plus plus like we would. That doesn't work. We need to set the state to our previous state plus 1. And that's our state notifier provider basically handled. Now we can actually showcase it. Before what we were doing this ref.watch within our actual column. But you can do it up here, especially if you use it multiple times. This is where it becomes really useful. Let's actually remove these children for now to make it a little bit cleaner. So to get our current counter value, we do ref.watch. And remember, we need to watch it because the counter will be updating, and we need to get those updates back into our UI. And we're going to be just watching the counter provider. This gives us the counter. We can actually just display the counter right away because it should be 0, but it has a value. Counter. Save. So our counter is at 0. Let me just, this is definitely not necessary, but let me give it a little style so it's a little bit bigger. Okay, now we have a bold and bigger counter. So the state is there, but how do we update it? Remember, the notifier is the one that actually does the updating of it. So we need a counter notifier. We need access to that thing. And I like to call these controllers. Maybe we can even call it a counter controller, because this is the one that actually controls that data. For this, we do ref.watch. You find the counter provider, but then you take the notifier from there. So when you do this .notifier, instead of just getting the data, you're getting access to this specific notifier, which gives you access to this specific function. Now down here, we could add a button. Whenever you press this button, we get the counter controller, and we can add something to it. And give it a child that says add. All right, so there we go. That's our full state management solution. If we click this, you see our counter gets updated. Now let's actually add another screen so we know that this data is app-wide and not just on one screen. So what I'm going to do is copy this widget. We'll actually just paste it down here just for simplicity. We'll call this second. Say counter on second screen. Actually label it same counter on second screen. Let's add a button that says go to second screen. And here, just get our navigator, like we've done multiple times, of this current context. Push a material page route of our second page. Okay, so now we go to our second screen. We should see the same counter with a 5. Perfect. And we can add on to that counter. Goes all the way up to 18. Now there's a little too much text. And we can just remove some of this so it's the same, in the same row, but we see we're able to add stuff in here. We're able to go back. The counter is still the same counter. And if, let's say, we want to change the counter logic or whole application to add by 2 instead, we save it in one place, and it adds by 2 here, and it adds by 2 here as well. So that's the magic of state management. Especially as your apps grow and become bigger, this is going to become a more important part of your app building process. It not only keeps you organized, but allows you to use that same state across different places of your application and maintain it. And depending on which package you use, you get some extra features. For example, with RiverPod, whenever we're using a feature provider, it makes sure that we handle all the other possible states. So that's state management. And now we can move forward with the rest of our Twitter application.